culinary school would teach you how to run a kitchen, um, how to cut knife skills, all these things. You could get that from hands-on experiences. You could get that from a person willing to give you a chance to work at their cafe, as I got to do. But me transitioning into being a food scientist at Rosho, there was a level of training I needed and education that I needed.
Hello viewers, Salam Alaikum. Hope everyone is doing well. We know it's been a while, but we are back with another episode of our career conversations, and I think we have today, as well as always, a very interesting conversation to be had in a very sort of, I would say, unique line of careers, unique line of work, and I really look forward to having this conversation. My name is Farhan Yusuf. I'm your host as always, and today with us we have Brother Shabbir Rashid, who I will ask him to introduce himself.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shabbir. I was born and raised in Mombasa and moved to Tanzania in 2017. At which point I had a year to think about what I wanted to do, and Alhamdulillah, I got into food. Into the food industry as a whole, I would say.
Okay. I think just by saying food, Shabbir, you already have the attention of many of our viewers, because I always feel like Tanzania, by design, I feel like we are a very foodie country. We love our food, and so it's nice to talk to someone who's behind the scenes of creating that food. Now, when we were thinking about this session today, in our mind, we were calling it culinary arts, maybe just to sound more cool, I guess, but maybe you can take us through a little bit about when you say you are, involved with food, designing food, what does that mean, and take us through your journey of, how you got interested in this and what have you been doing?
So I got into food because when we moved to Kibaha, I had a year to think about what I wanted to do. And I started watching a lot of YouTube. So I saw this show called Uncharted, where Gordon Ramsay would go into the depths of countries and find ingredients. He would go into caves, mountains, and find these amazing ingredients that nobody used in the cities. And then he would come back to the city, create food as a street vendor, and give it to locals, and just seeing how they reacted. Another thing I watched was a lot of MasterChef Australia in particular. We had a guy who's failed a couple of times to win, but nobody makes food on a plate as he does. Some of his dishes are like Alice in Wonderland, The Forbidden Fruit. So already by these names, you can understand that he would put a story on a plate. And that really made me want to do food. It made me want to make food. It made me want to start cooking. And in Kibaha, there wasn't much. I didn't have an oven. I didn't have ingredients. So I started making cupcakes on charcoal. And I guess that's where it all began. Yeah.
What I like about that is, the ability to draw inspiration from media and entertainment. I watch a lot of shows as well. MasterChef, I think, is an interesting one, although I don't think I've been inspired enough to turn into a chef, but it's definitely a show that I personally have enjoyed quite a bit. So, Shabbir, after that, what happens? Like you are watching this show, it is inspiring to you to sort of cook. You started, as you mentioned, with making, cupcakes on charcoal. Where does your journey take you next?
So there would be a lot of events that our community would do, bake sales, Milad al-Nabi sales. So I started using unconventional ingredients like herbs in sweet products, like baked goods. And once I realized that people liked the stuff I was making, my mom started giving it to her friends, some of the board members in Wipas, where I was staying. And that way, one of the board members liked what I was making, and his daughter had a cafe in Masaki. So he offered me a job, and I took the job. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from the cafe. I got to suddenly I had a team of 13 people under me, and prior to that, I had no experience in running a team, running a kitchen, let alone pleasing the high-end clients that would come with the Masaki cafe. So I got to learn a lot about food, how kitchens work, how kitchens are set up, how chefs work, how to bring structure into creativity, and that sort of molded me into the master chef person that I wanted to be. So after the first year of working at the cafe, after doing a lot of learning, the second year had me learn about how to plate these things, and fortunately, the boss that I had let me do whatever I want in terms of being creative. She had no, she never like held me down. I could do whatever I wanted, you know. So the first year I was a little timid, I was scared. But in the second year, I got to create recipes. I got to do costings for them because you need to be able to sell these things. Especially in Tanzania, people are not going to pay $100 for a dish. And I don't think people would do that anywhere unless it's like hyped up. So I got to do all these things with a balance. I had to create recipes that had ingredients that we had at the cafe. I couldn't just buy fancy ingredients just for one recipe. I had to create with what I had. And that's when I made Man vs. Pantry on Instagram. And there is where I showcase the food that I make, the plated desserts, the fire on a plate, I would like to call it. So I guess that's where I transitioned to right after Kibaha, getting the job at the cafe in Masaki. That was a really good opportunity.
Thank you for sharing, Shabbir. I mean, again, what I find interesting is that I don't know if people realize that, this career related to like being a chef or cooking, with what you have mentioned, we can see that it's like any other career, depending on, of course, where you're working. But I've heard you speak about like leadership skills and organizational skills and, like planning and being able to do more with the resources that you have, which are basically principles that you would apply in any other career, right? So it's not really very different from any other office job in many ways. In fact, I would say this is probably more fun and fulfilling than Excel sheets. But yeah, so interesting to hear that. And where are you now? Are you still doing that, or have you moved on?
So after working for 2.5 years at the cafe, I felt like I needed to leave a footprint if I ever left the world or whatever, if I grow old. I wanted to do something with my life, something more. And there's only so much further you can get with just experiences, So at the same time, I got offered a job at Rosho. So moving into Rosho, I realized that I needed to get certified. I needed to do a lot of training. I needed to learn about TBS and all these other factors that would affect my creativity. I could not just be creative at Rosho. I needed structure for the creativity. Filling out these forms of R&D and like using ingredients, how to make ingredients yours, because end of the day you will have to buy ingredients, but how do you make them yours? How do you add value? So I did a lot of studying into food technology, food science, food production, microbiology, chemistry. There was a lot of learning behind how these pathogens worked, how these all these other ingredients worked as well. And when I realized that, then I knew that I wanted to be more than just creative. I needed a little bit of learning to do. And Alhamdulillah, same with the cafe. Roshu gave me the freedom to learn. They gave me the freedom to be creative as well, because they knew I was a creative person, but they also knew that to be a part of Roshu's R&D team, I needed to have structure, I needed to have knowledge, I needed to have certificates. And again, this is where the learning came in, because you can never stop learning, I feel. And that's where I got some certificates. Even something as small as SIDO. It's a industry that Tanzania has created to teach you how to run businesses, how to create products, simple things as how a factory should look like, where the machines should be, the flow of the factory. All these things were very important for me to learn. And getting the CEDO certificate also comes with a lot of benefits, like tax cuts and all these things. So if you want to do that as an entrepreneur as well, it's a great opportunity. So there was a big learning curve, and Alhamdulillah, I was able to do that for myself and grow.
Good to know, Shabbir. So for our viewers who may not necessarily know what Rosho does, do you want to talk a little bit about what Rosho is and what Rosho does?
Yes, so Rosho is a company based in Tanzania. They have two very young founders who created a product with local ingredients. They wanted to add value to the market, and they did just that. They turned cashews, which is a very big cash crop in Tanzania, they turned it into a product that looked international but was for the locals. And now, alhamdulillah, it's even international in some ways. But they wanted to add value to the Tanzanian market. They wanted to bring more with what we had in the country. Again, back to the using what we have available. So Rosho creates products that they started with products that are good for you, healthy, and then transitioned into products that are better for you, in the sense that now we have the freedom to use chocolates, we have the freedom to use sugar in some of our indulgent products like the Rosho tarts. So yeah, that's where Rosho comes in Tanzania. They create products that are better for you.
Thank you for that, Shabi. And I asked that intentionally because I think, I want our viewers to also sort of see that there are a lot of different pathways just related to, I'll call it culinary arts because that's the phrase that comes to my mind. But, in your experience, we've seen how you started from and it's nice because it's not necessarily you don't need a particular educational background to get into this, right? Though we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but starting with doing things on your own and almost baking things yourself and providing that as a service, to moving to another sort of career pathway, which is working with a cafe, which has its own different nuance, slightly bigger in scale, I would say somehow. And then from there moving to an industry, or a company, factory that is again more scale and a lot of different elements, etc. You spoke a lot about upskilling and training, etc., which is again something that we apply in other careers as well. But then also to think about the fact that I think there's a lot of opportunity in getting into food even as an entrepreneur and as a business, right? Which is what your founders have done. And I think there is a country level national push in Tanzania for local manufacturing and creating our own goods and being able to export them to reduce importations, and empowering our own people. So there's a lot of different angles that people who are passionate about food can think about.
Right.
We often think of food as a hobby, a passion, something that we just do to survive, I guess,
Yes.
depending on who you ask. But from a career perspective, there's just so much, that can be done. Another thing that I would like to emphasize on is your, sort of push for CEDO. So for those who may not know, CEDO is Small Industry Development Organization. It's a government sort of entity that provides a lot of different short courses related to industry, manufacturing, marketing. I've seen some of their catalogs and I think their courses are quite interesting. And like Shabbir mentioned, doing the course with them helps you not just learn sort of the technical skills behind these things, but they also do help with setting up the business, getting
Right.
some of the different licenses and certificates, etc. So it's another resource that's available to Tanzanians at very affordable sort of costs. I've seen how much their courses cost. It's not a lot, but it can allow you to get into this space of small scale manufacturing and then go forward from there. So a lot of different avenues or different areas that one can explore. I brought up that element of educational background, Shabbir. Like, do you think at all does someone need to have a particular educational background to get into this space? Like, is that something that you think is important for you? But then also, as you are going through these different opportunities, whether it was working with the cafe or now working with Rosho, is there a need for some kind of educational background?
I would say for culinary arts, there was a lot of hands-on training, a lot of failures, a lot of trials, and to get as far as working at a cafe to be creative, I don't think you really need an educational background. Although a culinary school would teach you how to run a kitchen, how to cut, knife skills, all these things. You could get that from hands-on experiences. You could get that from a person willing to give you a chance to work at their cafe, as I got to do. But me transitioning into being a food scientist at Rosho, there was a level of training I needed and education that I needed. And so it depends on where you want to be, I guess. If you're talking about getting the most salary, the biggest salary, then of course I feel like to level up you will need an education. But again, this could come after you've had your hands-on experience, as I had. I worked for 2.5 years, almost 3 years at the cafe. And then after that is when I got into food science and microbiology and all these things, which then needed an educational background. Not background necessarily, but some sort of certifications.
Okay. And so again, I guess it depends on which pathway within this particular area you want to take, and then it would depend on, you need to sort of understand what it takes and then upskill yourself accordingly.
Right.
I think it would be a great sort of miss for this particular session if we don't address the whole gender bias when it comes to culinary arts. I know it's a tricky topic to discuss, but I feel it's important for us to do that, because I think, unfortunately, I don't believe in this, but I do know it's a general notion. A lot of people, seem to still believe that getting into culinary arts and cooking and baking and all of those things are primarily, like a female career. Although I'm sure many of us have also heard that globally, a lot of the better chefs are actually male, like Gordon Ramsay is a good example of that. Has that sort of played any role in your decision making process? Like, did that ever sort of hinder you from going into this? Is that something you are thinking about, number one? But then number two, also, as you've sort of moved through these different opportunities, have you noticed any difference in terms of like people's perception that you're a guy who wants to cook? Like, has that played any role?
So number one, all the cooking that I ever learned was from females. First my grandmother, and then obviously my boss at the Cafe Blanc. She's a female, and she had great experience in food and how food should look like, how food should taste like, because she had traveled the world and she knows what food should be. But it again depends on where you want to be with food. When it comes to food science versus culinary arts, there's a big difference. Again, this is societal norms, and to me, it doesn't matter. It never came across my mind. In fact, as a man in the food industry, I got a lot more attention than a female, I would say, would get. A lot more people wanted to see what I was doing as opposed to somebody who was next to me who was doing something similar. Say even in the bake sales, there was a TV crew moving around. I think this was in Train to Gain. And the moment they saw that a guy was cooking, they were really interested. So I feel like societal norms will be societal norms, but it never made me think about if I wanted to do this or not. I just really knew what I wanted to make people feel with food. I knew what I wanted them to react like when they saw the food I presented, and that's where I took it from. Like the people that I saw on the YouTube, online, like Gordon Ramsay, Reynold, Poenormo, Luca Manfe, all these people are guys. All the inspiration that I had was from guys, in terms of creating magic on a plate. So again, there's a difference between cooking, culinary arts, and then food science. So it depends on where you want to be. But I don't think these societal norms really affected my thought process.
Okay.
Not at all, yeah.
That's good to know, Shabbir, because I mean, I feel like, and that's sort of one of our running theme across this, series of podcast sessions that we've done, is that we really try to highlight, these unique, so to say, careers that aren't really pursued by people, or are, for one or the other reason, either looked down upon by people, or people have misinformation, or there are these like biases that people have, just to tell, because I do believe a lot of our viewers, listeners are young people, and I guess my sort of personal intention is to make sure that they are thinking, or they are taking some of these uncharted routes, different things, and not being bogged down. It's great that it didn't affect you, and I hope you can inspire other guys out there in our audience who want to get into this particular space. But we do know, as you mentioned as well, that these do play a role. So it's nice to know that they didn't really play a role for you. If I were to ask you, Shabbir, what do you like, having gone through all of these things, right? Like, and I'm sure every aspect has had its own sort of, but is there one particular, phase that you enjoyed the most? Like, was it that starting point where you are doing all these experimentations and all that on your own? Was it being able to one-on-one interact with, clients at the cafe? Are you enjoying more this space now? Would you be able to pick one and be like, what, this is, I'm sure you enjoy all of them, but is there a favorite?
This is a very tough one, but I think something that stood out to me in particular was catering, where I would go and our chefs, we would create a recipe, we would make a menu, and then I would give it to the chefs. We would make it in the kitchen, and then we would have to go to people's houses or venues to then put out the food on a table. And one particular moment that stood out to me was when I went to this family house in Masaki. I was wearing my gloves, the black gloves that you can see on my page all the time. I had my apron, I would go, sometimes I would go alone and plate out like food for like 30, 40 people. But other times I would have a waitress, helping me put things together. And something specific was when this couple just wanted to see how I was plating the food. Even though it was catering food, the way I would do it, I feel like they really enjoyed the process of me putting it on a plate. Me dirtying the platter before then putting, the small canapes on it, putting all these edible flowers, using these tweezers. I feel that is when I felt most alive. And then, again, this is a very tough question because right now I really enjoy working at Rosho. I really enjoyed the repetition that I used to hate a lot because I always just wanted to create. But again, Rosho came with a lot of stability and, all of this. But I feel like the catering made me feel most alive because I could dirty the table with like the sauces. And again, I'm saying dirty, but it was art for the people looking at it. There was another time we went to another family house. I think maybe I should have name dropped, but they the auntie that was watching me do it, my hands were shaking. I had never had somebody watch me do the catering stuff. And again, you can see this on my page as a time lapse that I'd posted. So I was there just plating the food, and she was just there in awe, like she had never seen anything like it. And she messaged my boss, almost like a 2-page message, telling her how amazing this guy is and how creative he is, and how on point he is with the hygiene, with the in particular what ingredients to put where, what flowers to put where, how it would look. So I feel like those moments really stood out to me most.
I feel like I would have been like the auntie. I love seeing. I mean, I'm just someone who's very passionate about arts in general, and whenever I see people creating art, I think it's very inspiring. It's one of those things that I think gives us life, gives us meaning. And seeing any artist create, I think has a lot of. It's very interesting and mesmerizing in many ways, and I can completely imagine that as an artist in that sense, what makes you feel most alive is being able to get that immediate sort of reaction and feeling from the people who are going to use your creation really at the end of the day. So it makes a lot of sense. Shabbir, are there any particular challenges that you would highlight in your journey? Like what were and how you overcame them?
There's been a lot of challenges, especially in the leadership roles that I've had. Even at Rosho, I have around 12 to 15 staff under me. But the toughest time I had was at the cafe, running a team. Some of the chefs didn't, not even some, there was one chef in particular who was the head chef before I got there. He didn't respect me because he knew that I hadn't worked hard for where I had gotten. Suddenly from Kibaha, I now had a job and as a manager, and I was telling him what to do, how to plate the food. And I don't think he liked that very much. But gaining that respect from chefs, gaining that respect from a team, as a young person, everybody's older than me. I was like 26, I think 25 or 24. So them seeing a young person now pushing them around, being strict, they didn't like it. And maybe I was also not using my ability as a leader well because I didn't know how to. But the cafe really had me learn a lot. A lot of things I learned the hard way. Most of it I learned the hard way. A lot of failures, a lot of mistakes, a lot of setbacks. But I think leadership was one of the toughest things that I learned. And that was one of the toughest challenges that I had in food. Because I was creative, I could put magic on a plate, but I couldn't lead a team. I just didn't know how to. I didn't know how to interact with people. And then I learned slowly, how to hold conversations with clients, how to maintain suppliers, how to, befriend them so that you can pay them later. So a lot of it comes from communication and leadership, all the biggest setbacks and challenges that I had.
And again, I feel like a lot of our viewers and listeners will resonate with that because, unfortunately, it's also again a common challenge for young people to sort of get into sectors and prove themselves. And of course, I think you had a very unique, interesting opportunity of going directly to leadership, which many a times doesn't happen in many of our, corporate leader sort of structures. But then there are young people who do chance upon those kinds of opportunities. And I think, again, for me, this is both for our listeners who might be young people like Shabbir, to be like, take those risks, get into those spaces. If you get opportunities, you learn along the way. Of course, there are ways you can think about how to learn communication, how to learn leadership, and there are various resources out there that can sort of prepare you. But then always, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. And I'm happy to use a culinary statement there. But the more you do it, the more you learn. So there's that angle. But then another angle is, if we do have listeners and viewers who are in positions where they can allow young people to sort of come and take up leadership roles. I think it's also important for us to create those spaces and trust young people to do the kinds of things that they are able to do with their passion. I think those are very important. Shabi, you keep mentioning your page. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, what is the page? Feel free to shout it out so that people can follow. What do you do on that page? What can people expect to see there?
So on Man versus Pantry is where I had started my food journey as a whole. So if you scroll way down below, you could see the first things that I ever cooked, some of the horrible things that I made. Some things are archived, but I think I should unarchive them. It's been quite some time, so maybe I should. But then eventually you can see my growth on that page. You can see the plated desserts, the professional videography that was done for them. You can see the process behind the videography of the plating of the food. Basically, you can see everything from my culinary time at the cafe and after as well. The page doesn't have much of my work at Rosho as R&D and stuff, because we have a Rosho page for that. But again, we still don't post the R&D and the journey behind the products. Maybe I should do it on Man vs. Pantry, but on my page you will see the art that I was creating and that I still create as a side thing that I do. Now I still do catering once in a while here and there, but I started a small side gig called Kur Kitchen. And kur comes from the word, the Islamic word, which means that a drop of blood, let's say, or najasat cannot dirty maybe 100 liters of water, So that is a side thing that I'm doing, aside from Man vs. Pantry, just as a business, as a side thing where I can just express my creativity and have people buy it. Man vs. Pantry has a lot of focus on the plated desserts, on the fine dining, on the catering aspects. So yeah, maybe you could look into that, Man vs. Pantry on Instagram and Facebook as well. And also LinkedIn, by the way.
Nice. So if you are looking to be inspired in everything cooking and culinary arts, and I'm sure Shabi would be happy to interact with you as well through those social media platforms. So look for Man vs. Pantry on Instagram, on Facebook, and you can connect with Shabbir on LinkedIn as well. I think it's important for us to create those connections, and especially for those of you who, even after listening to this session, are still a bit hesitant, you can reach out to him for some extra boost of motivation. Being in this space, Shabbir, are there any specific opportunities that you see for people who want to get into that space? Like, is there a particular kind of cuisine they should think about, a type of food? Let's say someone is interested and they want to try out and start something of their own. Are there any specific opportunities that you've spotted?
Well, in Tanzania, it's a tough one, because in every corner of every road, there's a restaurant, there's a cafe, and as a country that values money more than creativity, value for money more than creativity, I feel it's a tough one. But again, that's if you're looking at the salary aspect, if you want to make the most amount of money. But again, there's a lot of structure required. You can't always be creative all the time. There's a lot of back and forth. But again, there is agencies that are focus based. So there's agencies that study the production line. They teach you how to create a production system. They teach you how to, create systems for your staff, SOPs and all these things. And there's also agencies that travel the world actually to do R&D for companies and then leave. There's a company in Italy that sells machines, but they have an R&D team that helps you create a recipe for the machine that they will give to you, they will sell to you. So again, there's two ways to go about it. If you really want to be creative all the time, you could start an agency, where you could do freelancing for these companies, or you could go into a company, work with them, and be okay with repetition, be okay with bettering what already exists, being creative once in a while.
And Shabir, if I may ask you, the courses that you mentioned on like food science and are, I know you've mentioned CEDO as one place where people can do those courses. Are there any other courses that you are able to recommend to people, or any other institutions that provide these courses?
I think it depends on how seriously you want to be taken, because there's institutions like Allison. Now, Allison is, I don't know how seriously people take those certificates, but I feel even there's a lot of learning to be done. And CEDO is another one, but CEDO I don't think has like stuff like microbiology, chemistry, because you need to know how to use these ingredients, these chemicals. So I feel like you can look into universities outside that allow online learning and then provide proper certification. But furthermore, you could also get into Allison and just do the learning and gain what you can from there. They have certificates that they provide that you should pay, that you need to pay for. But I feel like it works. It depends on how seriously you want to be taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for those who may not know, ellison.com is a place where you find a lot of different courses. I guess, there are different courses related to culinary arts as well. So, that's a resource. I'm quite sure Coursera and all of these other online
Right.
sort of education platforms probably have something as well, just for you to get a basic sort of overview and understanding of, some of these concepts. But then definitely, I think if you are going to take a more like serious role in a company or in an industry that's doing like large scale or even medium sized manufacturing, I think you will need to get
Right.
certified and all that. And I'm sure there are local entities that can provide that information, like TBS, etc. I think they should have that. And I think it's a great opportunity generally, because like I mentioned earlier, the country is pushing for a lot of local manufacturing, and so the idea is that we would have more and more industries coming up, and so there will be a demand for skilled labor for those industries. And rather than having expatriates or other people coming in, I think there is an opportunity for local Tanzanians to take advantage of. So definitely something for you all to consider. Shabir, as a last sort of question, are there any words of advice, wisdom, that you want to give to our viewers who are watching us today, in terms of them wanting to get into this space of culinary arts?
So in regards to wisdom, nor am I Imam Rida or Maulana Jalaluddin, but I would say that when you have a gap year, go into the space, try and get a job, work experience job. Try looking into the different departments that the company has, whether it's a cafe or it's a company like METL, or they have departments for these things. See how they work, see how the R&D team works, see the repetition in that. Then I guess that way you can decide. When it comes to culinary arts, I feel like you need to try, you need to fail, and you need to fail better after. So I feel like just taking that step in your gap year would be amazing. Get into these companies, see what they do, see how they do it, and then you can decide.
Okay. Thank you for that, Shabi. I mean, what I would add to that is that, I think you can even start from home, I would say, especially for, the guys listening to us today. And I would also urge the moms to allow the boys to come into the kitchen and cook, because I know there's a cultural connotation there as well that I think we need to break as much as possible. So it starts from home. I really like that Shabbir kept on mentioning magic on a plate. I think that's a great way to think about it. And so start by creating magic on a plate at home, right? For your family members, for your friends, and that can be your first sort of experimentation ground. And then, as Shabbir mentioned, I think not if you are planning to take this more seriously. I mean, we've spoken about work experience and the importance of it on this podcast many a times across different careers that we've explored. I think that's something that in today's time and age goes without saying. As much as you can get work experience, it's important for you. So whether it's a gap year, whether it's those small holidays that you have in between your studies, a few months and all that, make sure you're using them well. Try and go and find these opportunities. I also think I have an opinion about field trips and schools, especially at like primary, secondary level, doing field trips. I think we need to sort of bring that back. I almost feel like back in the day when I was younger, much back in the day now, we used to have a lot of these field trips to different industries, etc. I feel like I don't see more of that anymore. I mean, I could be wrong, and please feel free to, comment and prove me wrong at that. But if we are not doing that, then I think we also need to sort of bring that back, make it more mainstream, because, again, if we are trying to push for local manufacturing, if we are trying to push people in these kinds of careers, I think it's important for, young children to be inspired, and when they go and they see the way these things are done, that will go a long way in inspiring them. So I'll stop at that note. Thank you so much, Shabbir, for speaking with us today. Wishing you the best in everything that you do. And for everyone listening, please do follow Shabbir on the social media pages that he has shared. Start creating that magic on a plate wherever you are, and we will come back with another session soon. Thank you.
Thank you.